But truly, like, becoming people who see other people as people.
Yes.
And what does that mean? How does that change our behavior? And we all have bad days. We're all going to have days when we get impatient and we lose our temper. But being able to then surrender that, to confess it if it's egregious, and then pick back up and start again, right?
And we build this into the family culture just by, like, with very simple statements, right? We do it all the time in my house. Like, why are we doing this? Because this is what we do.
Does your bank make you feel like you belong there? At Alliance Catholic Credit Union, you are a member of a financial institution that serves the Catholic community, providing you with an opportunity to align your banking with your Catholic identity. You receive all the products and services you need to manage your money, and your membership helps support Catholic schools, parishes, and organizations. It's time to put your money where your faith is. Visit AllianceCatholic.com to get started today. Service, community, Catholic. Alliance Catholic Credit Union. Federally insured by the NCUA.
Welcome to Beyond Sunday, a podcast for parents like us, striving to weave the Sunday experience into the everyday moments of our week. I'm your co-host, Nicole Joyce.
And I'm your other co-host, Rakhi McCormick. Step away from the back-to-school clothes, or the lack thereof. Put down the school supply lists and join us as we talk, laugh, and reflect on our experiences raising Catholic families and discovering God within our everyday lives. So, Nicole, do you have your back-to-school shopping done?
No.
Have you started your back-to-school shopping?
Yes.
Okay.
There's always a really big sale on backpacks at the end of July.
Right.
So any kid who needs a new backpack, that's the time I purchase them.
Now, do your kids get new backpacks every year? Because I fight my children with this every year. I'm like, your backpacks are fine. They function. You will use them again.
No, we have a minimum of 2 years per backpack.
Okay. That seems fair.
Yes. And we get them from like a catalog company that has a lifetime warranty on their backpack. So even if they grow out of their backpack, you know, like when you go to high school, for example.
Right. You don't necessarily want the Care Bear backpack anymore.
Well, and you need a really big bag because, you know, you have your computer and like all your high school textbooks are very large.
Right.
Like algebra books are big. So when they grow out of their backpack or they do need a new one, the ones that we have still have a lifetime warranty, which is great because then we can give them to someone who might need one.
Oh, that's,
you know,
that's a great.
If they can find even like the most tiny flaw in it, they can like trade it in. So it works out pretty well.
Do they try to make a flaw?
No, but we have had to use the lifetime warranty a few times with like handles ripping because, you know, the kids like to like swing them around over their heads like lassos sometimes. I don't.
Yeah.
If any of you have school-age children, you know what it's like when they take their backpack off and just like chuck it across the house.
Oh my gosh, right? Like, ours just dump it.
Yes.
Come in and it just gets dumped.
See, but my 11-year-old, like he like has to pull it off like over his head. Like why can't it just slide off your shoulder? He's like swinging it up over his head. He's like, whoa,
because he can.
I don't know what he's doing there. So yes, we got the backpacks, but no other school.
We've got school clothes. I think we're good because we have uniforms, of course, and so just wanted to get all that squared away because come closer to school, those get to be hard to find.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're good on shoes, but we have not even. I haven't even looked at the school supply list this year.
Oh, shoes! I forgot about shoes. They can't go to school in flip-flops or bare feet.
No.
Least favorite part about going back to school is that my laundry loads get bigger because then they have to wear socks. Because in the summer, they just live in like bare feet and bathing suits.
Yeah.
But then they have to wear actual clothes.
Right.
And, I'm not a fan.
So anyway, that was a long intro to the fact that school is starting soon.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. I mean, if you homeschool, then perhaps you have been doing some things all summer. But for those of us who are in parochial and public schools, we are facing down that to-do list before those bells ring again.
It's here.
It is.
So I thought this week would be a really good time to talk about those traditions we have, the way we live our lives in the busyness of the school year.
Yeah.
Summer's a nice time to chill. It gets a little busy in summer with vacations and camp and things like that, but it really ramps up during the school year, right? Like all the back to school shopping and things, but also like all the after school activities. And if you're in parish faith formation or you're preparing for a sacrament or
it's a sacrament year for us.
Yeah. So there's like all these other things that happen in there. And we've mentioned this a little bit on previous podcasts, but I thought this would be a good time to talk about what does it really mean to build a family culture?
Well, right, because once you're thrown into this mix of school, there's a lot of pressure to do all the things. And I don't know about your kids, but my kids are, they're kids, and they come home and say, well, so-and-so does such and such, and their family did such and such. And so, this whole idea that just because we're part of this school doesn't mean that we necessarily embrace the culture of all the other families. Right. And as we're taking a look at the readings from this weekend, too, they talk about who Jesus came to save. So, like, who is part of the family of Christ? And a hint, it's everyone. He came to save everyone.
Shocking.
Right. But, when you take a look at the first reading, it's foreigners who join themselves to the Lord. When we look at the second reading, it's the Gentiles. When we look at the gospel, it's the Canaanite woman. So it is their faith and their intentional decision to join themselves to the Lord that makes them part of the family of God. And so this is more just a background and a thought, like the choices that we make speak to who we are.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think your ethnic culture or your nationality, those aren't really things that you can choose in the same way, right?
No.
But how you live
right.
to join yourself to the community of Christ is a completely intentional decision. And it's something that you explicitly decide that you want to exercise in your family.
Well, it's something that we have to explicitly decide and intentionally practice. I think that there is a real temptation to just be like, oh, I was raised Catholic, or there's that culturally Catholic where my great-grandparent was Catholic, and so we're Catholic. But for each of us, we are asked that question, right? Like we are called to make that decision for ourselves, to intentionally commit ourselves to living as the family of Christ. And, I came into the church myself, and so I don't have that lineage to fall back on. But it really is our intentional decision to follow Jesus, and for us as parents to create a culture, a family culture that joins us to the Lord and that sets us apart, because that's what we're called to. So, Nicole, How do we do that?
I like to talk about this like we're getting ready to eat dinner. Like we're getting ready to have a family dinner. This is my...
Are you cooking? Because I don't want to cook.
I do love cooking, so I would be happy to do that.
Great.
And I'll even make something Korean
awesome.
at request. But I like to talk about it from this idea of like, okay, let's imagine that we are going to have a big family dinner, and we know that we need certain things just around your dinner table, right? And I always talk about how you have, first off, where are you going to eat, right? So you need to have a table.
Right.
Everybody has a kitchen table or a dining room table.
Or the floor, or the couch, whatever.
But like, where do you come together as a family to eat your meal, right? And I say, imagine your table where you eat your dinner, your family dinner table is like those non-negotiable things, those things that we all do, and that does come from our faith. It is informed by our faith. We have to do them, kind of like
they're the non-negotiables.
Yeah. So, and the fancy term for that is the precepts of the church.
Ooh, very fancy.
Right. So, like, we go to Mass on Sunday and Holy Days. We receive the Eucharist at least once during the Easter season is the precept, but as frequently as we can. Right. We go to confession at least once a year, and we observe all the days of fasting and abstinence from meat, and we give, right? Almsgiving. Those are like the non-negotiable things. So, if you've ever in your whole life, I'm sure lots of parents can relate to this. If you've ever been at the dinner table with your kid and he's refusing to eat and said something like, okay, but you have to at least take 3 bites of this thing.
Yes.
Or you don't have to eat the rice, but you have to eat the chicken.
Yeah.
Or one small bite of everything. Yes. All those
you
all
have
those
to try
things.
it before you can tell me you don't like it.
Yes. That type of negotiation, that's what we're talking about. Right. What is the bare minimum here that we're being called to do to live in the world as disciples? Like this is the bare minimum. If we're going to be Catholic, we're going to do these things.
Yes.
And they're not negotiable. And then we have what I would say are like the exciting fancy side dishes.
Ooh.
Yes.
Very
so
nice,
these are things like what we're doing here on this podcast, talking about ways that you can live liturgically, ways that you can kind of weave what you hear at Mass on Sunday and what you read in Scripture through the everyday moments of your life. So those extra things. Like,
and we've talked a little bit about this because
absolutely,
that's
what we do here.
Right? But like, do you have family saints? Do you have different devotions that are near and dear to your family? And some of those can be passed down through generations. Maybe you grew up reciting the rosary every Sunday with your family, and so you do it with your own family. Or maybe there are new things that you're discovering because the world has opened up in terms of getting to know different saints and different cultures and different devotions. And that's such a beautiful thing to see the universality of the church. And maybe some of those ring true for your family.
And I think we've mentioned this before, but like, sometimes we'll do something on this one random feast day boom, it's a tradition.
Right.
Every year, same date. My kids
are so
remember
good
it. They're
about
like,
that, yeah.
last year on the feast of so-and-so, we had McDonald's. So now we
it's
have
always
to do
food.
that every year.
It's always food.
Well,
remember when we had
course.
ice cream on Blessed Solanus' feast day?
No, ice cream is a tradition
Right.
on
Every
feast
feast
day in my house.
Oh, I love that image of the dinner table and the meal, because the other thing that a meal does is it gives us sustenance to go out and do the things that we're called to do. And
Yes.
that is the other part, I think, of our family culture. I think sometimes we can get introspective and take a look at what's happening inside our walls, both just as like a domestic church and the church universal. And I think the beauty of that analogy of the meal is that meal prepares us to do something. And so the other part that I like to think of for building our family culture is how our family becomes like a witness to the world with our outside actions, and especially in non-church related things. And this is something that we struggle with because our life work is in the church. So like Tim teaches at a Catholic high school, I work at a parish in school. And so we have to be very intentional about making sure we don't become insular.
Yeah.
And we are reaching out to people who maybe aren't part of the church.
Yeah.
Right, because that's our call.
Absolutely.
That's our call.
Absolutely.
So how are the non-negotiables and those extra little side dishes molding us to live in the world? Because what that should be doing is shaping the very fabric of who we are.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the easiest thing, especially when they're little and maybe they don't have like a huge vocabulary to be able to talk about this or even really think about it in a very deep way, is just that we do these things regardless of where we are, right? If we're out to eat and it's a feast day, are we still going to say grace before we eat? Absolutely.
Right.
Are we still going to make reference to those saints who we're celebrating or remembering? Yes. Do we have to sometimes figure out a different church to go to for Mass to work around the schedule of a baseball game or whatever else might be happening that day? Yes. And that's just part of what we've always done, and we talk about it very openly, which allows our kids to feel comfortable and confident to be able to share that with people as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment, because I know that some of the conversations that come up when I'm talking with other moms is, what do you do when you have kids' friends over, right? Or your kid goes to another friend's house and they do things a little differently. And I think that we need to be very comfortable in giving our kids the confidence to still be able to stop and say grace before a meal.
Absolutely.
Like, they're not being rude at someone else's house if they're going to stop and say grace. Or if they have a friend spending the night, that it's just, and it's a Saturday night, that it's expected that if they stay, then they will be coming to church on Sunday. Like, that's what our family does.
Right. Absolutely.
And there's no shame. There's no pressure, but there's no shame in that either.
Yes. We are a very like open door kind of family. So there's very frequently an extra kid in our house or in our backyard or in our pool or at the dinner table.
Sure.
And so we always, when we get ready to sit down for dinner, we always say like, okay, we're going to say grace. And the kids who come to our house all know we're Catholic because my kids tell everybody we're Catholic, right? But we say, we're going to say grace. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you could just wait like the 30 seconds it takes for us to say our prayers, then we will all start eating together. And they're always like, okay, cool. So, and it's never been done in a way that feels embarrassing or shameful. And my kids find no issue with it. And they are not, it's not something that they've ever even considered like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that in front of people.
Right.
So again, that's really what we mean when we say culture. We're not just saying like, do the thing because we're supposed to.
No.
But because it's just something that we have always done and it's been built into the fabric of how we live our lives.
Yeah, and that's really, we're not talking about cotton here, the fabric of our lives, but when we're talking about building disciples, which is what we're doing, right? Like, we, in our families, we are growing disciples, both growing in discipleship ourselves, but we're raising little saints. And so what we do as a family, what we choose to do as a family, how we choose to live in the world really becomes ingrained as part of that person, right? So they're not just actions. It's not the what, but it becomes the who.
Yeah.
And so it is just part of my ethos that I'm going to say grace before meals, that if I see a person on the side of the road that is in need, that I'm going to stop and at least acknowledge their presence, even if I don't have something to give to them. And so those things just become who we are. Like, we are living with Christ in us. And so building a family culture that then does that. And again, I know I sound like a broken record, but that's one way that we're countercultural too, is in these small decisions that we make as we're raising our children.
Let's talk about some of those small decisions. Like in the real world, like not even directly related to practicing our faith, what are some ways that we can be very intentional about the way we interact with other people that's informed by our faith, informed by our family culture? What's something that we as a family decide that we're always going to do? And you mentioned one already, which is if you see someone who needs help, you're always going to stop, acknowledge them, right? Like that's something that not all families would do.
Right.
But what else can we do?
Well, I mean, one that comes to mind, especially since I just drove here this morning mid-traffic, is, curbing the road rage.
Ooh.
It's convicting, right? But, maybe we're not speeding through the yellow light just to get ahead of everybody else. And maybe we're taking our time, and maybe we're acknowledging that there are other drivers on the road, or that, God is the author of time and he will take care of, even if we're a few minutes late, we'll be okay. And it's just kind of the attitude that we bring to that everyday the everyday movements.
Yeah.
That they're an attitude of grace and of patience. And you're looking at me because you know that I'm speaking to myself. Right?
And since we're getting ready to go back to school.
Oh, right.
It might be a good time to talk about exercising some of that patience in the drop-off and pickup line with our fellow parents.
And with your teachers and school administrators.
Yes.
For your kids to be, respectful within the classroom. But even like when we're going out, like treating servers and workers with respect, that they're not there just as an object to bring you what it is that you've ordered, but they're actual people. Mm-hmm. Tim always laughs at me because I am a little bit like my mother, and then I will start a conversation. Like,
That's
if they
my
have the time, right?
too.
Like, how's your
I think
day
we
going?
Talked about this when they were here. Yes.
Yeah. Like as I'm recovering from surgery, I'm having a conversation with my nurse, and I find out all these things that are going on in her life and these pain. And so we're praying together, and we're praying for her. And then she's crying because she's like, I'm supposed to be taking care of you. I'm like, I don't know. I'm on drugs right now, so I'm good. Right?
Oh my gosh.
But truly, like becoming people who see other people as people.
Yes.
And what does that mean? How does that change our behavior? And we all have bad days. We're all going to have days when we get impatient and we lose our temper. But being able to then surrender that, to confess it if it's egregious, and then pick back up and start again, right?
And we build this into the family culture just by with very simple statements, right? We do it all the time in my house. Like, why are we doing this? Because this is what we do. This is we're Joyces.
Oh gosh, this is
right.
Mom,
or
right?
So and so does have to do that. Well, they're not a Joyce,
right?
They don't live here, right?
Right.
Like,
right.
That's a very frequent conversation in our home. And as your kids get older, you will.
But
have
I think
that
you can also model those things in how we treat one another within the home.
Oh, sure.
Right, like 'cause that's where it starts.
Yeah.
To be able to apologize to your child, or to teach your children how to apologize. That's a really big one for us. It gets a lot of groans and eye rolls for me, because I'll get after they've done something, they'll be like, sorry. I'm like, what are you sorry for?
Whatever that thing is that
I know.
You said.
I'm like, no, because what you need to tell me is what you're sorry for and why. Like, what is it that you did, and how did that affect the person you did it to? Mom, I'm like, can we use words? I am sorry for screaming. It was an overreaction. Anyway.
And then I think the last part of this that we could talk about today is like, what does it look like when our family culture maybe doesn't match with another family's culture? And that doesn't necessarily have to do with being Catholic or not Catholic, or being Christian or not Christian.
Right.
But I think there are some rules or practices that some of us might think are the only way to be a Catholic family.
Right.
And I just want to make sure that we acknowledge those here, because there are many ways to be living out our faith and many ways to write our family culture and still be Catholic.
100%. And we're going to have different sensibilities given the children that God has given us, given our own predisposition to different habits. Yeah. And so our cultures are going to look different based on the need of our family too. And I think one of the areas we often see, I don't want to say conflict, but disagreement, are like on the different rules that our families have and our children have, right? When we're parenting.
Yeah, like I think about technology rules is a really big one in our house.
That's a huge one right now.
And actually, I think my family might even be different from a lot of other families who are Catholic as well, in that we are pretty excessively screen-free in our house. Like we have very limited use of the television or computers outside of doing schoolwork or actual work. And it's, we've never been like a a gaming kind of people. Like my husband's didn't grow up playing video games in the same way. He wasn't like a gamer, so to speak. I'm not really a big tech person. So I think there still is some conflict sometimes with my kids, like, oh, well, so-and-so has a phone or so-and-so has a PlayStation and they do this and that and they have their own laptop. And I always say, like, but that's just not how we're doing that in our family.
Right. And that is definitely an area where you have a wide range of perfectly acceptable ways to approach that with your children.
Absolutely. And I pass no judgment on another family who is all about those things, the family who has future coders and gamers and experts in those areas. That's awesome. If that's your gift, cool. But it's just not what we've discerned is what's for us.
Yeah.
Right.
That was the culture I wanted to have, and then COVID happened, and they needed computers to be able to do online school. And so here we are.
Yeah.
3 years later, trying to negotiate those things. Another area that we often have, the phone is always one, and that is, I think we have talked about this before, we are a no phones for kids family.
Yeah. Until
at least high school, and then we're not there yet, so we're not crossing that bridge because we're not there yet.
Sure.
Right? And everything will change by the time we get there anyway. But another one would be like dating.
Oh, dating is a really big one, right? We have a lot of different levels of what we think dating could look like in Catholic families. Some people think, okay, then there's no dating until you are an adult and you're ready to discern marriage. Some people say, oh, dating is okay, but only within certain parameters, not being alone. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different levels there.
Wide range there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I think
I was going to say with that one too, like we talk about, okay, so it doesn't matter what your friend is doing, right? Are you comfortable doing that? What is the purpose? Why do you want, like we talk about the reasons.
Yeah. I think we could have a whole episode on dating, especially for our older teens and like our young adults, parents of young adults who are kind of like trying to figure out this whole idea of dating these days, because it certainly looks different now than it ever
it's a
did.
Foreign land from like, when we were,
Yes. And
especially you, because, high school sweethearts over there.
I married my high school boyfriend. So I'm not going to be like, oh, dating in high school is terrible. It never leads to anything, because clearly that is not always the case. Right. But I do have a 13-year-old who has had a lot of middle school girls chasing after him kind of. And it's been a really interesting conversation because he himself is not interested.
Right. And that's dating. Where my almost 13-year-old daughter is too.
And it's part of our family culture too, that we don't really think dating is the right thing to be doing at his age anyway. But he's discerned that he's not really interested in it either. And so he does get a lot of questions. Sometimes people will be like, oh, so like, do you just not like girls? Like, are you going to be a priest? Is it because you're Catholic? And he's like, no, I just don't want to date right now. Like, I want to go to school and have fun with my friends.
I have other interests.
Like,
absolutely.
He's like, that just...
It's not my top interest.
Right, exactly. And if we're being real honest, he's seen, like, the boys who end up with quote unquote girlfriends in middle school, and they just have to follow this poor girl around and they don't get to go anywhere and do anything fun, and he's like, why would I want to do that?
That sounds like a healthy relationship right there. Again, we could do an entire episode or 10 on all of that. But that is definitely something that as the kids get older we have to broach, because different families have different sensibilities, different students have different sensibilities, and so that's a conversation that as they enter middle school we've had a lot more of, and it starts so early. It starts so early.
Well, I mean, I think I was in like second or third grade when I first had a little crush on a boy and thought he seemed nice and wanted to be around him all the time, right? Like that's just part of our...
I mean, I had two boyfriends in kindergarten. Does that count? What does that really mean?
Did you pretend to get married during playtime?
No, we didn't.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't even know what it meant. I have no idea. I peaked early. But anyway, other things that...
Tim, if you're listening, we're really sorry.
He knows the story. He's good. But when we're talking about... I think the other part, too, is like when we are being a family out in the world, we're going to be asked to participate in things that maybe don't always go in line with all of Catholic teaching.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to talk about that, because there's a broad spectrum of like how much participation different families who are Catholic will agree to within certain activities, right? Like watching certain movies, participating in certain community events like parades.
Absolutely,
yes, there's a lot of that.
And, I think for me, the sensibility is we align ourselves with the people in things where we agree, and we can pick and choose
Yeah.
I think when we're taking a look at that to say, okay, we agree with this part, but not this part.
Yeah. And I really want to emphasize that there is no one Catholic way to do any of these things we've mentioned, or really many others that we don't have time to even talk to here. I think it's always going to be about parents coming together as husband and wife and as parents and saying, what's our family being called to do, and how are we going to live this in the world in a way that is both sharing of our faith, but also building up our children in a way that makes them effective witnesses to their faith as 100%, they become adults.
Right, and confident in who they are in the body of Christ.
Yes. And we really need to be prayerful and intentional about avoiding that temptation to pass judgment on other families who do it differently.
Right.
We can't be those people.
No, and that just harms the body.
Absolutely.
Right.
Especially if they are also Catholic.
Right. And I think that there's a difference in you have a close and intimate relationship with somebody and you can bring it into question in a loving way to say, oh, why did you choose to X, Y, Z?
Right.
As opposed to the...
seeking to understand it is different than falling to the temptation of judging someone else's decision.
Absolutely. Like, oh, you're not Catholic because you X, Y, Z.
Right.
Can we also just stop telling people whether they're Catholic or not? Let's just put an end to that. There's enough pressure.
It's like a whole separate episode that we could
absolutely
dive into there.
But anyway, I hope that this kind of sheds some light and starts to get people to think about, okay, so we're the McCormicks. When you think of the McCormicks, what do you think of? And to start thinking of their families in that way too, like, let's take this from out of a spiritual realm, but let's talk about branding, right? Like, if you were to brand a family, like, would people know you're Catholic?
Yeah.
And why would they know you're Catholic?
Yeah. But then also that there are some decisions that you'll make as a family that are informed by your faith, but they're not dictated by it, right? They're not a non-negotiable.
Oh, no, 100%.
So I always want to be cautious, like, okay, well, we've decided as our family, we'll take smartphones, for example. Sure. My kids don't have social media. They won't until they're much older.
Correct.
So that's a perfect example. I would never say, well, you don't have social media because we're Catholic. I would say that's not something that we as a family want to be part of our family culture. It's informed by our faith, absolutely, right? So I like what you're saying about branding. I think that it's important because we're talking about us as a family, and our culture is informed by our faith, but that's not the only piece of it. Yeah.
No. And I think it's not so much that it's going to be a cookie cutter, like this is the Catholic brand.
Yeah,
there isn't that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I did need to clarify that. Right, I'm not saying that there is a Catholic brand, but I'm saying that when someone looks at your family, do the decisions that you make even give them a hint of the Jesus that you believe in?
Sure. Absolutely.
Would they know that you believe in Christ based on the decisions that you are making for your family? That's more what I'm saying.
Yes, I think that's a good thought to take to heart when you start thinking about how do you want to discuss this with your family, and how do you want to discern what God's asking of your family. So that's our challenge this week. It's actually for the parents, for all you parents, to have a conversation with your spouse about what your family culture looks like right now. Because whether or not you've been intentional about using the words family culture, you already have one. Right? The culture is the way you're living, the way you experience things, the way you internalize things, and the meaning you give to your behaviors and your practices and your traditions. So take some time and discern, what do you want it to look like this coming school year, and what kind of steps can you take as a family together to make that be what you like, what your vision for your family culture should be.
I love it. Thank you for listening to Beyond Sunday. We hope the week ahead is not filled with back to school craziness, and that you can spend some time to enjoy that family culture in these last few weeks of summer vacation. You can find more episodes at 52sundays.com/podcast, or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can reach us at beyondsunday@aod.org.
Does your bank make you feel like you belong there? At Alliance Catholic Credit Union, you are a member of a financial institution that serves the Catholic community, providing you with an opportunity to align your banking with your Catholic identity. You receive all the products and services you need to manage your money, and your membership helps support Catholic schools, parishes, and organizations. It's time to put your money where your faith is. Visit AllianceCatholic.com to get started today. Service, community, Catholic. Alliance Catholic Credit Union. Federally insured by the NCUA.